I'm going to take a chance that I can still spin a tale with that hum on the camera. I've cleaned the camera a couple times. The replacement camera is taking a while to get here. So I'm going to go ahead and spin my tale. The hat goes on. Don't believe a word I say. Uh, well, uh, the other couple now, we're talking about Scott and Katrina, sometimes called Kate. Uh, they arrived at the Bank on It restaurant and went up some steps to go in. There's beautifully decorated, real classy looking place, really, and it preserves some of the history of when it was a bank. Well, there was no. Let me think. Prof. Prof wasn't there yet, so they chose a table where they could have a view out across Sadler Creek Valley, and ordered a couple salads. They all these adults are, every one of them's a little bit different in their own way, and they're a little bit more diet conscious and stuff. Scott ordered a chef salad, and Katrina ordered what was it, a Caesar salad. That was going to be fine for their lunch. Well, before long, in comes Prof. He wasn't very late at all, and he walked up to them, and he said right away, "Are Yuns having a great day?" And they both nodded their heads. Yes, it's really been wonderful so far, and thanks. And so what Prof, he sat down, and when the waitress came over, he just nodded his head the regular, and he was there all the time about that time, so she knew just what to get. So Scott stopped eating a little bit and said, because remember, the purpose of this meeting was for them to learn. And Scott said, "So, Prof, how did you do it?" But then he paused and he said, "Wait a minute, I should probably say, how did Yuns do it? Because you didn't do this by yourself." What I mean is, how did Yuns make a town, develop a town as special as this? And now, right away, Katrina objected. Scott sort of knew she would. She said, "Scott, don't talk like that. You sound like a hillbilly." And at that, Prof sort of launched into a linguistic display. He said, "Mrs. Nafsker, most all of us here in Roaring Spring can speak the Prestige dialect. I could have said, how did you two, how are you two having a good day? Or are you, Scott, and you, Katrina, having a good day?" But it's more efficient to say, "Yuns, are Yuns having a good day?" Because I wanted to make sure that you both were included. If I'd said, "How are you having a good day?" you might have thought I was only talking to Scott or only talking to you. So Katrina, this was a pet peeve of hers. She said, "Well, I suppose we should have answered, we Yuns are having a fine day." And Prof, he wasn't going to back down on this because he cared too about this matter. He said that would be silly because we is already plural. You don't need a yuns at the an uns at the end. We. You could have said, "I'm having a good day," or "We are having a good day," but with you, it's only singular. But here, in our dialect, we have a plural, so I was using yuns. About that time, the waitress came up and said, "Are yuns okay?" He smiled, and he said, "Case in point. You see, she's being plural. She's being polite. She doesn't want to single me out. She wants to include all of you." Well, Katrina still wasn't really quite satisfied. But from that point on, Prof and Scott went into the Prestige dialect because, of course, that's all Scott spoke. and that's all Katrina spoke. Uh, but Scott, Prof, wasn't quite ready to let this go. He said, you know, here in Roaring Spring, Roaring Spring is a town near here that's very much like Erstrink. Here in Erstrink, we have krikkers and kreekkers. I'm a krikker. And as most people are krikkers. But there are always lots of kreekkers as well. And what I mean by that is that word C-R-E-E-K, well, in our informal dialect, friendly dialect, we'd call that a krick. But you know, there's other people they can't get past the idea that there's anything other than the prestige dialect, and they said, look at the way it's spelled, with the double E. It ought to be creek, and you know, Prof was beginning to think he was going to have to just leave this for the sake of politeness, but he said, well, take the word night, K-N-I-G-H-T. Do you say knicht? Because it's spelled K-N-I-G-H-T. It's pronounced N-U-Y-T, night. And you see, he had a pet peeve too. He had been involved in the battle to give an alternate spelling to a lot of these words for the sake of learning Dutch, the language of the Mennonites and Amish. And you know, Scott took a big risk here, but he said, Kate, when you were in Paris, do you go around speaking English? When in Paris, you speak French, and you speak it beautifully. I choose, if I want to try to learn to speak the dialect here. But with you, we'll continue to speak prestige dialect. Well, that was a bit unpleasant, but not really. So, Scott repeated his question. So, Prof, how do you do it? You know, Katrina groans. Mumbled, you sound silly, Scott. And Prof said, well, I can answer that question with one word, actually. And that one word is cooperation. Cooperation. You maybe don't think of that word very much, but that was at the very heart of this town. It was in it from the beginning, in a way. There is a humanitarianism in this population. I don't know exactly where it came from, but this building that we're sitting in no, not this one, the tavern over there. That tavern was originally built by IOOF, Independent Order of Oddfellows. It was an Oddfellows home. And Oddfellows, that was one of the original humanitarian groups, fraternal humanitarian groups. And this town, it's only got a population, it never had a population of more than 3,000, I don't think. And it's got a Rotary Club, it's got a Lions Club, it has a Masonic Lodge, it has a VFW, it has an American Legion, it has 4 mainline churches right here in the borough. Each one of them have their councils. There's cooperation all through this town, and that's not even mentioning the government, our duly elected borough councilmen and women. So it was already there, but confronted with the future, see, now he's speaking very careful prestige dialect. Confronted with the future of the demolishing and the cleanup of the tannery, the town was confronted with what can we do to prevent something that is polluting like that was for 100 years with its smell, even with all the good jobs and all that. What can we come up with it? And they cooperated. You know, let me have a bite to eat here, but I'll explain in a second here because I do have to get back to work. But he said, you see that white building up there almost looks like a lighthouse, as if it were a fourth hotel here. That up, it's almost on top of the hill. We cooperated in the idea that we should build that as a monument to cooperation. In that building up there, and they were looking out the corner, you know, they had to look a little bit out the side because it was quite a distance from their hotel, which was right across the way, the Lucerne. And it was way up as high as the Alp, and way over there at the gap. There it was, spectacular. He said, we built that as a monument to cooperation. And in that building, there's two museums. There's a museum to Robert Owen. Did you ever hear of him? And Scott said, oh, of course I have. Well, Katrina wasn't quite so sure. Well, there's a museum dedicated to Robert Owen, and there's also a museum dedicated to the Bisses. Now, you probably don't know what Bisses are yet, right? And Scott said, no, I don't actually think I do. Well, later. Let me have a bite to eat, and then I'll explain about a little bit more about how this town was able to do this. Bye for now.